Chaos erupted in the gilded halls of the Salaran embassy. Laser fire scorched ornate walls as panicked diplomats fled in all directions. Ethan Reeves, a battle-hardened human soldier, ducked behind a fallen pillar, his pulse rifle at the ready. This was supposed to be a routine security detail for the first-ever human delegation to Xalora Prime. Instead, it had turned into a bloodbath. Through the smoke and confusion, Ethan caught glimpses of the attackers, definitely not Xalaran. Their chitinous exoskeletons and multiple limbs marked them as Vrax, a notoriously aggressive species from a neighboring system. A high-pitched scream cut through the din. Ethan's enhanced hearing pinpointed its source, an ornate chamber at the end of the corridor. Without hesitation, he sprinted towards it, dodging energy blasts and leaping over debris. Inside, he found Princess Nera, heir to the Xalaran throne, cornered by 3 Vrax warriors. Her iridescent scales shimmered with fear as she clutched a ceremonial staff, clearly outmatched. The Vrax, sensing easy prey, chittered in anticipation. Ethan didn't hesitate. He opened fire, his well-placed shots dropping 2 of the Vrax before they could react. The third whirled, mandibles clicking in fury. It lunged at Ethan with terrifying speed, razor-sharp claws extended. Years of combat training kicked in. Ethan sidestepped the charge, using the Vrax's momentum against it. In one fluid motion, he brought the butt of his rifle down hard on the alien's head. There was a sickening crunch, and the Vrax crumpled to the floor. Panting, Ethan turned to the princess. Her large, violet eyes were wide with a mix of fear and awe. You saved me," she stammered in halting English. "Just doing my job, Your Highness," Ethan replied, offering a hand. "But we need to move, now." Naira hesitated, then grasped his hand. Her touch sent an unexpected tingle through Ethan's arm. He pushed the sensation aside, focusing on the task at hand. "Stay close," he instructed, leading her towards the door. The corridors were a war zone. Bodies of both Xalaran guards and Vrax attackers littered the floor. Ethan moved swiftly, Princess Naira keeping pace behind him. Her grace under pressure impressed him. Clearly, there was more to her than just royal privilege. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of Vrax. Ethan shoved Naira behind him, raising his rifle. But before he could fire, a bolt of energy shot past him, striking the lead Vrax square in the chest. Ethan glanced back in surprise to see Princess Naira wielding her staff, its tip glowing with power. "I am not entirely helpless, human," she said with a hint of a smile. Ethan grinned despite himself. "Noted, Your Highness, shall we?" Together, they fought their way through the embassy. Ethan's marksmanship and combat skills complemented Naira's energy blasts and knowledge of the building's layout. They made for an unexpectedly effective team. As they neared the embassy's secure bunker, a massive explosion rocked the building. The ceiling above them began to collapse. Without thinking, Ethan threw himself over Naira, shielding her with his body as debris rained down around them. When the dust settled, they found themselves trapped in a small pocket of space, cut off from both their pursuers and potential rescue. Ethan's armor had taken the brunt of the impact, but he winced as he moved. Definitely some cracked ribs. "Are you hurt?" Naira asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'll live," Ethan grunted. "What about you?" "Thanks to you, I am unharmed." She paused, studying him intently. "Why did you risk your life for me?" "Our species have been wary of each other for centuries." Ethan met her gaze. "Because it was the right thing to do. Human, Xalaran, or whatever, no one deserves to die like that." Naira was silent for a moment, then placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you, Ethan Reeves. I will not forget this." As they sat in the darkness, waiting for rescue, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The Vrax attack, the princess, the unlikely alliance they formed, it all felt like pieces of a larger puzzle. Little did he know just how right he was. or how the events of this day would reshape the future of both their species. As the dust settled in their small sanctuary, Ethan and Nira quickly realized that waiting for rescue wasn't an option. The sounds of battle still echoed through the embassy, and the Vraks were likely searching for survivors. "We need to get out of here," Ethan said, wincing as he shifted debris. "Any ideas, Your Highness?" Nira's brow furrowed in concentration. "There's an old maintenance tunnel beneath this section of the embassy. If we can reach it, we might be able to escape undetected." Ethan nodded, impressed by her knowledge. "Lead the way." Together, they carefully moved rubble, creating a small passage. Ethan's enhanced strength proved invaluable, while Nira's slender form allowed her to squeeze through tight spaces. As they worked, Ethan couldn't help but notice the determination in the princess's eyes. She was far from the pampered royal he'd initially assumed her to be. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a dimly lit corridor. Nora oriented herself quickly. "This way," she whispered, gesturing towards a nondescript panel on the wall. With a few deft movements, she revealed a hidden keypad and entered a complex sequence. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel. As they descended into the darkness, Ethan's tactical mind raced. "This attack doesn't make sense," he muttered. "The Vraks are aggressive, sure, but a full-scale assault on a diplomatic mission. It's too risky, even for them." Nara glanced back at him, her violet eyes gleaming in the low light. "I fear you may be right. There have been whispers in the royal court, factions unhappy with the prospect of alliance with humans, but to go this far..." Her voice trailed off as they reached a junction in the tunnel. Nora hesitated, then pointed left. "This should lead us to an exit near the city's outskirts." As they continued, Ethan's unease grew. "Princess, I think we need to consider the possibility that this attack wasn't just about derailing diplomacy. They seemed particularly focused on you." Nira's steps faltered for a moment. "You believe I was a target?" "It's a possibility we can't ignore," Ethan replied grimly. "Which means we can't trust anyone until we know more. Not your people, not mine." The gravity of the situation settled over them. They were alone, cut off from their respective chains of command, with unknown enemies on all sides. Suddenly, Nira stopped. "Listen," she hissed. Ethan strained his enhanced hearing. Faint voices echoed from up ahead, speaking in a harsh, clicking language. "Vraks. They found the tunnel network," Ethan whispered. "We need another way out." Nira's eyes widened in realization. The old transit system. It's been abandoned for decades, but it might still be functional. With the sounds of pursuit growing closer, they had no choice but to trust in Nira's knowledge. They backtracked to a rusted hatch Ethan had barely noticed earlier. It took their combined strength to wrench it open, revealing a vast, dark cavern beyond. The ancient transit platform was a marvel of alien engineering, even in its dilapidated state. Ethan marveled at the sweeping arches and strange, pulsing conduits that lined the walls. But there was no time for sightseeing. Nora was already moving towards a control panel, her fingers dancing over symbols Ethan couldn't begin to comprehend. With a grinding of long-dormant machinery, a sleek transport pod emerged from the darkness. "It still works," Nira exclaimed, a note of relief in her voice. They clambered inside, just as the first Vrak scouts burst into the cavern. Ethan laid down cover in fire as Nira worked the controls. With a lurch that nearly sent them sprawling, the pod shot into a tunnel, leaving their pursuers behind. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, Ethan turned to Nora. "So, Your Highness, any idea where this thing is taking us?" Nira's expression was a mix of excitement and apprehension. "If the old maps are correct, we're heading towards the Forbidden Peaks. It's a treacherous mountain range, but it's also home to some of our most ancient ruins. If we're to uncover the truth behind this attack, that might be our best chance." Ethan leaned back, processing this information. He was a soldier, trained for combat, not solving ancient alien mysteries. But as he looked at the determination on Nora's face, he knew there was no turning back now. "All right, Princess," he said with a wry smile. "Looks like you and I are in this together. Let's go find some answers." As the pod hurtled through the darkness towards an uncertain future, neither Ethan nor Nora could have imagined the incredible journey that lay ahead, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their worlds and themselves. The ancient transit pod screeched to a halt, nearly throwing Ethan and Nora from their seats. As the doors hissed open, they were greeted by a blast of icy wind and the imposing silhouettes of the Forbidden Peaks looming against a purple sky. "Well, Your Highness," Ethan said, surveying the desolate landscape, "I hope you packed for cold weather." Nyra's scales shimmered, adjusting to the temperature drop. "The cold doesn't affect us as it does humans," she replied, "but I'm more concerned about the treacherous terrain ahead." As they set out, the differences in their physiology became increasingly apparent. Nyra moved with fluid grace across the rocky ground, her feet finding purchase where Ethan struggled. Meanwhile, his enhanced strength allowed him to clear obstacles that would have been insurmountable for the Salaran princess. "So," Ethan grunted as he helped Nira over a particularly steep incline, "care to fill me in on these ancient ruins we're looking for?" Nyra's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "They're remnants of the Forerunners, a civilization that predates both our species. Legend says they left behind great technological wonders and warnings of a terrible threat." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Warnings? That sounds ominous." "Indeed," Nura nodded, "but much of our knowledge is fragmented. The royal family has guarded these secrets for generations, believing the masses weren't ready for such revelations." This touched a nerve with Ethan. "With all due respect, Your Highness, keeping people in the dark rarely ends well. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way." Nyra's scales flickered in what Ethan was beginning to recognize as irritation. "Our ways may seem strange to you, human, but they have preserved our civilization for millennia." Their bickering was cut short by a low, rumbling growl. Ethan's hand flew to his weapon as a massive, six-limbed creature emerged from behind a rock formation. Its fur was white as snow, with gleaming fangs and claws that looked capable of shredding armor. "Frost Stalker," Nora whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Extremely dangerous predators." Ethan's combat training kicked in. He raised his rifle, preparing to fire, but Nora's hand on his arm stopped him. "Wait," she said. "Killing it will only attract more. There's another way." Before Ethan could protest, Nora stepped forward, her scales beginning to pulse with a hypnotic pattern of light. She began to sing, her voice a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the very mountains around them. To Ethan's amazement, the Frost Stalker's aggressive stance relaxed. It cocked its head, entranced by Nora's display. After a tense moment, the creature turned and loped away, disappearing into the snowy landscape. "That was incredible," Ethan breathed. Nora's scales rippled with what might have been a blush. "An old Salaran technique. We believe in harmony with our environment, not domination." Ethan nodded, a new respect for the princess forming. "I see now why your people have survived so long in this harsh world." As they continued their journey, the cultural exchanges flowed more freely. Ethan shared stories of Earth's history, its triumphs and mistakes, while Nara spoke of Salaran traditions and philosophies. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their curiosity about the universe and their desire to protect their people. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the mountainous terrain, when they finally caught sight of their goal. Nestled in a valley between two towering peaks was a structure unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. It seemed to be made of a material that shimmered and shifted, defying the laws of physics as he understood them. "The Nexus," Nera breathed, her voice filled with awe. "The heart of Forerunner knowledge on our world." As they approached, Ethan felt a strange tingling sensation throughout his body. "Is it supposed to feel like this?" he asked, unnerved. Nora nodded, her own scales rippling with energy. "The Nexus responds to conscious thought. It said that only those deemed worthy can enter. They stood before a seamless wall that pulsed with soft light. Nora reached out, her hand hovering just above the surface. "Together," she said, looking at Ethan, "human and Zalaran united in purpose." Ethan hesitated for just a moment, then placed his hand next to hers. The wall beneath their palms grew warm, then seemed to melt away, revealing a corridor bathed in ethereal light. As they stepped inside, the entrance sealed behind them. Ethan and Nera exchanged a look of determination tinged with apprehension. Whatever secrets lay within the Nexus, they would face them together. Little did they know that the revelations awaiting them would shake the foundations of both their civilizations and set in motion events that would echo across the galaxy. The interior of the Nexus was a labyrinth of pulsing light and shifting geometries. Ethan's military training hadn't prepared him for anything like this. Every step seemed to defy gravity, and corridors appeared and disappeared at will. Without Nera's innate connection to the place, he would have been hopelessly lost. "How are you navigating this?" Ethan asked, his voice hushed with awe. Nera's scales shimmered with concentration. "It's difficult to explain. It's as if the Nexus is communicating directly with my mind, showing me where we need to go." They continued deeper into the heart of the structure, passing chambers filled with incomprehensible technology and holographic displays that flickered to life as they approached. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, evaluated. Suddenly, they emerged into a vast circular room. At its center stood a pillar of swirling energy, tendrils of light reaching out like living things. As they approached, the energy coalesced into a humanoid figure, neither male nor female, neither human nor Zalaran, but somehow both. "Welcome, seekers," the being spoke, its voice resonating in their minds rather than their ears. "We have waited long for this moment." Ethan's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but Nera placed a calming hand on his arm. "Who are you?" she asked. "We are the Custodian, an interface created by those you call the Forerunners," the being replied. "We exist to guide and to warn. The time has come for you to learn the truth of your origins and the threat that looms over all life in this galaxy." The room around them shifted, becoming a three-dimensional star map. Ethan and Nera found themselves floating in space, watching as the history of the galaxy unfolded before them. Long ago, the Custodian narrated, the Forerunners seeded life throughout the galaxy, including the ancestors of both humans and Zalarans. "We guided your evolution, hoping to create species that could one day stand against a terrible enemy." The star map zoomed in on a dark region of space, where something massive and ominous lurked. "The Void Eaters," the Custodian continued. "A force of cosmic destruction that consumes entire civilizations. The Forerunners fought them to a stalemate, but at a terrible cost. We retreated, hiding our remaining strength and placing our hope in the species we had nurtured." Ethan and Nera watched in stunned silence as scenes of an ancient war played out before them. The scale of destruction was beyond anything they could have imagined. "But why keep this hidden?" Ethan demanded. "Why not prepare us openly?" The Custodian's form flickered. "Fear. If knowledge of the Void Eaters spread too soon, panic would have torn your civilizations apart before they were ready. But now, the enemy stirs once more. The attack on your embassy was no coincidence. Agents of the Void Eaters seek to keep your species divided and weak." Nera's scales paled. "The Vrax, they're working for this ancient enemy." "Some unknowingly, others willingly," the Custodian confirmed. "The Void Eaters corrupt and manipulate, turning species against each other." As the implications sank in, Ethan felt a mix of anger and determination. "So what do we do now? How do we fight something like this?" The star map shifted again, focusing on a series of points scattered across the galaxy. "These are other Nexus points," the Custodian explained. "Together, they form a network that can be awakened to create a defense against the Void Eaters. But it requires the unified effort of multiple species working in harmony." Nera's eyes widened in realization. That's why the diplomatic mission was so important. The alliance between humans and Xalarans is the first step towards a galactic coalition, the custodian finished. Your two species, with your complementary strengths and shared origin, are key to rallying others to the cause. The weight of this responsibility settled heavily on both Ethan and Nera. They exchanged a look, seeing in each other the determination to face this monumental task. "We'll do it," Ethan said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Nora nodded in agreement. "But we'll need proof to convince our leaders. They won't just take our word for it." The custodian's form began to fade. "The knowledge has been implanted in your minds. Use it wisely. Remember, unity is your greatest weapon against the coming darkness." As the being disappeared, the room returned to normal. Ethan and Nera stood in silence for a moment, processing the enormity of what they had learned. "Well, Your Highness," Ethan said with a wry smile, "looks like we've got our work cut out for us." Nora's scales shimmered with a mix of emotions. "Indeed, but I'm glad to have you by my side, Ethan Reeves." As they prepared to leave the Nexus and face the challenges ahead, both human and Xalaran knew that their journey was far from over. The fate of the galaxy now rested on their ability to bridge the gap between their peoples and forge an alliance strong enough to face the cosmic horror that threatened all life. Little did they know that their greatest tests, both as individuals and as representatives of their species, were yet to come. Emerging from the Nexus, Ethan and Nera found themselves changed. The knowledge imparted by the custodian weighed heavily on their minds, but it also filled them with a sense of purpose. They knew the monumental task that lay ahead, convincing their respective leaders of the threat and the need for unprecedented cooperation. Their journey back to civilization was fraught with danger. The Vraks, now revealed as pawns of the Void Eaters, had intensified their efforts to hunt down the human soldier and Xalaran princess. Ethan and Nera's newfound understanding of each other's strengths allowed them to navigate the treacherous landscape with remarkable efficiency. As they neared the outskirts of the Xalaran capital, Nera turned to Ethan. "We need a plan. Simply announcing what we've learned could cause panic or be dismissed as madness." Ethan nodded grimly. "Agreed. We need to gather allies, people in positions of power who will listen." Their first stop was the human embassy, or what remained of it after the attack. Ambassador Elena Frost, a shrewd diplomat with a reputation for open-mindedness, listened to their tale with growing concern. "This is extraordinary," Frost said, pacing her makeshift office. "If what you're saying is true, it changes everything. But the evidence is here." Ethan tapped his temple. "The custodian gave us access to technologies that can prove our story. We just need the resources to demonstrate them." Meanwhile, Nera reached out to her most trusted advisor, Kel Vox, a veteran of Xalaran's scientific community. His initial skepticism quickly gave way to excitement as Nera shared some of the advanced concepts she had gained from the Nexus. By the first egg, Kel breathed, his scales shimmering with awe. "This could revolutionize our understanding of the universe, but the implications are terrifying," Nera finished. "Which is why we need your help to present this to the High Council in a way they can't ignore." Over the next few days, Ethan and Nera worked tirelessly with their small group of allies. They compiled evidence, prepared demonstrations, and strategized on how to approach the delicate political situation. The fate of two worlds, and potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The day of reckoning came sooner than expected. A joint session of Earth's United Coalition and the Xalaran High Council was hastily convened to address the recent attack and the future of human-Xalaran relations. It was the perfect opportunity to present their case. As Ethan and Nera entered the Grand Assembly Hall, they could feel the tension in the air. Suspicious glares were exchanged between human and Xalaran representatives. The attack had strained the already fragile diplomatic ties. Admiral Junius Chen, the head of Earth's military delegation, was the first to speak. "This unprovoked assault on our embassy cannot go unanswered. We demand, unprovoked, Elder Sira Kesh of the Salaran Council interrupted, her scales flashing angrily. Your kind has been encroaching on our territory for years. Perhaps this was simply enough. Nora's voice rang out, silencing the hall. All eyes turned to the princess and the human soldier at her side. What happened at the embassy was neither unprovoked nor a simple territorial dispute. We face a threat far greater than our petty differences. Over the next hour, Ethan and Nera presented their evidence. They shared the knowledge gained from the Nexus, demonstrated some of the advanced technologies they now understood, and laid out the dire warning of the Void Eater's return. The reaction was mixed. Some dismissed their claims outright, while others listened with growing concern. Ambassador Frost and Kel Vox provided crucial support, lending credibility to the fantastic tale. As the debate raged, a commotion outside the hall drew everyone's attention. Sensors blared warnings of multiple unidentified craft entering Salaran airspace. Before anyone could react, the wall of the assembly hall exploded inward. Through the dust and debris stepped a nightmarish figure, a Vrax, but twisted and changed. Its exoskeleton pulsed with dark energy, and its eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence. Your time is at an end, the creature spoke, its voice a horrifying blend of insectoid clicks and something far more alien. The Void Eaters have awoken, and your pitiful species will be the first to fall. Chaos erupted in the hall, but amidst the panic, something remarkable happened. Without a word, Ethan and Nera moved in perfect synchronization. The human soldier's combat prowess merged seamlessly with its Salaran princess's energy manipulation abilities. Together, they engaged the Void Eater's puppet in a dazzling display of interspecies cooperation. Their example galvanized others. Admiral Chen found himself fighting back-to-back with Elder Kesh, their earlier animosity forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Human Marines and Salaran guards coordinated their efforts, their complementary tactics proving highly effective against the alien threat. As the battle raged, more and more of the assembled leaders realized the truth of Ethan and Nera's warnings. The threat was real, immediate, and far beyond anything they could face alone. In the aftermath of the attack, as the dust settled and the wounded were tended to, a new resolve filled the assembly hall. The evidence of their shared enemy was undeniable, and the effectiveness of their united defense was clear to all. Admiral Chen, his uniform singed and torn, approached Ethan and Nera. It seems we owe you both an apology and our gratitude. What you've shown us today, it changes everything. Elder Kesh nodded in agreement, her scales shimmering with a mix of emotions. Indeed, the path ahead will not be easy, but it is clear that we must walk it together. As the human and Salaran leaders began to discuss plans for a formal alliance and preparation for the coming conflict, Ethan and Nera shared a quiet moment. "We did it," Ethan said softly, still somewhat in disbelief. Nara's scales rippled with a warm glow. "This is only the beginning, Ethan. The real challenge lies ahead." They both knew she was right. Uniting their two species was just the first step. There were other races to convince, ancient technologies to master, and a cosmic horror to confront. But as they looked at each other, human and Salaran, soldier and princess, they felt ready to face whatever the universe might throw at them. The stage was set for the greatest united effort in galactic history. The war against the Void Eaters was about to begin. In the months that followed the dramatic events in the assembly hall, the galaxy witnessed an unprecedented era of cooperation and technological advancement. The Human-Salaran alliance became the cornerstone of a growing coalition of species, all united against the looming threat of the Void Eaters. Ethan and Nera found themselves at the heart of this galactic preparation. Their unique bond and shared knowledge from the Nexus made them invaluable in bridging gaps between different species and unlocking the secrets of Forerunner technology. On a bustling space station orbiting a neutral world, Ethan stood before a holographic display of the galaxy, watching as more and more systems pledged their support to the cause. Nora entered the room, her scales shimmering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "The Krex have finally agreed to join us," she announced. "Their bioengineering expertise could be crucial in adapting our forces to fight in diverse environments." Ethan nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Good. We'll need every advantage we can get. Any word from the deep space probes?" Naira's expression darkened. "Yes, and it's not good news. The Void Eaters are on the move. Our estimates give us less than a standard year before they reach populated systems." The weight of their responsibility settled heavily on both of them. They had come so far, but the true test still lay ahead. As if sensing his thoughts, Naira placed a comforting hand on Ethan's arm. Her touch still sent a subtle thrill through him, a reminder of the deep connection they'd formed. "We've achieved more than anyone thought possible, Ethan. Don't lose hope now." He covered her hand with his own, drawing strength from her presence. "You're right. Come on, we've got a war to win." The next months were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan found himself leading joint military exercises, teaching human tactics to alien species while learning their unique abilities in return. Nora dove deep into diplomatic negotiations, her royal background and newfound knowledge making her a respected voice among the Coalition's leadership. Together, they oversaw the activation of more nexus points across the galaxy, each one strengthening the network that would be their primary defense against the Void Eaters. But even as their preparations intensified, reports of the enemy's approach grew more frequent and dire. Finally, the day they had been both anticipating and dreading arrived. On the bridge of the flagship Harmony, a joint human-Salaran vessel that symbolized their alliance, alarms blared as sensors detected a massive distortion in space-time. "This is it." Admiral Chen's voice rang out across the combined fleet. "All ships, battle positions. May whatever gods you believe in be with us today." The Void Eaters emerged from the rift like a nightmare-given form. Their ships, if they could be called that, were enormous constructs of dark energy and twisted matter. Reality itself seemed to warp around them, and the very sight of them caused pain to organic minds. Ethan and Naira stood side by side on the Harmony's bridge, coordinating the Coalition's efforts. As the battle was joined, it quickly became apparent that despite all their preparations, they were facing a foe of almost unimaginable power. Entire ships were snuffed out of existence by the Void Eaters' weapons. Others were corrupted, their crews twisted into monstrous puppets that turned on their former allies. Yet the Coalition fought on, their diverse tactics and technologies keeping them in the fight against all odds. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan noticed a pattern in the Void Eaters' movements. "Naira, look," he shouted over the din of battle. "They're trying to disrupt the Nexus network. If they take out enough nodes, our defense will collapse." Naira's eyes widened in realization. "We need to strengthen the network, but how?" "We'd need to channel an enormous amount of energy through the remaining nodes." A plan began to form in Ethan's mind, crazy and desperate, but possibly their only hope. What if we use the Harmony? Its power core is based on Forerunner tech. If we can interface it directly with a nexus point, it could supercharge the entire network. Naira finished, her scales pulsing with excitement. "But Ethan, that would mean..." "A one-way trip, I know." He met her gaze, seeing his own mix of fear and determination reflected in her alien eyes. "But if it gives the rest of the fleet a fighting chance, it's worth it." Naira nodded sullenly. "Then we do it together." They relayed their plan to Admiral Chen, who reluctantly agreed. As the Harmony disengaged from the main battle and made a desperate run for the nearest nexus point, Ethan and Naira worked feverishly to modify the ship's systems for their audacious gambit. The Void Eaters, sensing the danger, redoubled their efforts to stop them. The Harmony shuddered under their assault, its shields failing and hull breaching in multiple sections. But through it all, the unlikely pair of human and Zalaran pushed on, their bonds stronger than ever in the face of almost certain doom. As they reached the nexus point, Ethan and Naira stood before the ship's pulsing power core, hands hovering over the final controls. Around them, the Harmony was coming apart, the void of space visible through widening cracks in the hull. Nora, Ethan began, wanting to express everything he felt in what might be their final moments. I know, she replied softly, her scales shimmering with an emotion that transcended species. Me too. Together, they activated the sequence. Energy surged through the ship, through them, and into the nexus point. The network of ancient technology flared to life across the galaxy with an intensity never before seen. A wave of purifying energy swept outward, burning away the corruption of the Void Eaters. Their monstrous forms recoiled, their hold on reality weakening. The Coalition fleet, emboldened by this turn of the tide, pressed their advantage. On the remnants of the Harmony's bridge, Ethan and Nera watched in awe as their sacrifice turned the tide of the battle. As the ship's systems finally gave out and darkness closed in around them, they clasped hands, their fingers intertwining in a final gesture of unity. In the years that followed, the story of the human soldier and the Xalaran princess who gave their lives to save the galaxy became legend. Their sacrifice marks the beginning of a new era of interstellar cooperation and exploration. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of the universe, two consciousness heirs, one human and one Xalaran, found themselves reborn in a realm beyond physical form. Their journey, it seemed, was far from over. But whatever adventures awaited them in this new state of existence, they would face them as they had everything else, together.